Imagine chasing a psychology career dream for years, rejection after rejection, and still finding the courage to keep showing up. That's the story of today's guest, Jack, a trainee clinical psychologist who applied 6 times before finally securing his place on the doctorate. Jack's route has been anything but ordinary, from football coaching in Wales to working as an assistant psychologist. He's woven his love of teamwork, mindset and motivation into a journey defined by perseverance and purpose. In this episode, we talk about what it really takes to keep believing in yourself when the system feels impossible, the self-doubt, the sacrifice, and the quiet moments of resilience that get you there in the end. Because sometimes success in psychology isn't about being chosen, it's about choosing to keep going. Hope you find it so useful, and if you do, please like, subscribe, and follow for more. Hi, welcome along to the Aspiring Psychologist podcast. I am Dr. Marianne, a qualified clinical psychologist, and I'm joined here today by Jack Griffiths, who is a first-year trainee clinical psychologist. Hi, Jack.
Hi.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on this episode. You've been on my radar for a little while because you contributed as a case study to a chapter that I wrote on a book on autoethnography. So that's where you first caught my eye, because you were talking about your work kind of as an academy coach and kind of the responsibility and the pleasure that it brought you, but how it helped you think about kind of psychology and psychology principles. Could you tell us a little bit about your route, Jack?
Yeah, so I started coaching football around the age of 23, 24 after I had a couple of ACL injuries, tore my ACL. It was the third time I've done it. So I thought it was time to hang up the boots and delve into the world of coaching. And at the same time, I was an assistant psychologist, and I quickly discovered how important it was to kind of merge those two passions of mine and how they kind of reinforce one another and how they helped improve myself as a coach, but also as a practitioner. And that's for loads of different reasons. I think it was communication was a big one, how you interact with people, your leadership styles, and probably most importantly, the culture you create. And as soon as I use some of the psychological principles that I've learned as an assistant and through my undergraduate degree and whatnot, it really helped improve that culture and create a nice environment for the young lads. So a lot of the boys we were working with were between the ages 16 and 19, so it's quite an impressionable age. And yeah, quite the responsibility as well, because I think for a lot of the boys, football is their world, as it was for me for a while. And it goes really well. I've learned a lot, developed my skills really well, and it was a really good 5 years. I've had lots of different roles. The last role I had was chairman of the club, so it's quite a big club in Wales. In fairness, I'd say it's more than a grassroots. It was an academy at one point, and I've been first team coach. I've been player. I've been lots of different things really, and it's put me in good stead for training now on the doctorate finally.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit about that word finally shortly as well. But actually, before we hit record, you told me a really lovely story about how psychology came into your life. And it's too powerful a story to not tell and not let you tell. Could you retell us that?
Yeah, I think for me, psychology has been something I've been interested in probably from my teenage years. Something I've always been interested in, always been curious about, and you don't really learn about it at comprehensive school doing your GCSEs. It certainly wasn't a topic we studied in school, but it was something I was drawn to. I remember doing like English lessons. We have to go to the library and pick books, and I was often drawn to the science and psychology section, picking up books on memory and learning the method of loci, and have people testing me on lists of items I can remember, and yeah, I was very curious and very passionate about that, and that led me then to psychology A levels across Key's College. And I think the first person I spoke to on the open day was a psychology teacher, and it's kind of gone from there. Then I've just kind of followed my interests. I think lots of people, especially on the course, they've wanted to be a clinical psychologist since they were like 17, 18. Whereas for me, it's just been following what I'm interested in and maybe what I'm good at as well and what I'm drawn to. Yeah, so I've gone through a conventional route in that sense, but I feel like since since I've graduated, it's been maybe a little bit more unconventional, a little bit different to most people. I don't think there's many football coaches slash trainee psychologists in the country, and yeah, it does make me sound a little bit different, and yeah, something that I think is really complemented each other and certainly helped me in each of the areas. But also, I think it's because I enjoy both of those things as well. So if I can merge those two, I'm enjoying life really.
And that is so lovely to see, because actually sometimes people join training and they're like, oh, this is not what I thought. This isn't good. But like you're pleased with where you're at. And, with, I guess you've still been able to, you still feel like you, I think that's kind of what's coming across.
Yeah, I don't know if I've changed. I probably haven't changed much. I think you'd have to ask my friends and family if I've changed, but I don't think I have, to be honest. I feel quite grounded and quite secure in who I am and what I enjoy and what I'm interested in. I think as long as you do that, and as long as you're following your interests and your passions and doing what's right for you, I think yeah, you're going to be fine.
Yeah. And I did an episode with Jack Lowe. We were talking about job crafting. And that's the idea of actually being able to take your experiences, what you've learned, maybe some of the vulnerabilities there from seemingly kind of maybe not super relevant roles, not directly clinical relevant roles anyway. Have you been able to do that a little bit from your experiences with your academy work, and with the kind of young men that you've been coaching, to kind of weave into your psychology reflections and interviews and applications?
Yeah, I think early on it was one of those messages you often get from people is with psychology, nearly everything is relevant. If you're working as a lifeguard, like I used to do, if you're working with lots of different people, it's going to help your people skills, your interpersonal skills, which is really really important. So I've kind of always, I suppose subconsciously maybe I've always thought about what can I take from this and apply it to psychology, and that's certainly what you do when you're applying for jobs and things. So thinking about how my time as a lifeguard helped me assess risk and work with people and deal with people. That was always something I thought about. So when I've had to do that with football, it was probably a lot easier because I was doing it at the same time as well. So I was literally leaving the hospital and going across the road in Estrabanac to the training pitch and coaching people, coaching the young boys. And then I think at first I probably didn't bridge that gap. It probably took a little bit of reflection, a little bit of thinking about, okay, what can I do here? And the more I learned as an assistant psychologist, the more I could apply it to my role as an academy coach, as a football coach. And you start, yeah, I start bringing in things quite literally. Then it was using things like the Oscar model and motivational interview and doing halftime team talks, for example. That was something that I thought, okay, this is a real tangible thing I can take over quite concrete here and quite specific. And it would often be the case of asking people, okay, what have they done well this half? What can we do better? And having them come up with their own ideas. That was I thought it was a little clever trick that I used to do at halftime. And the boys used to talk. And we give them autonomy, we give them competency. They feel quite related, building on that self-determination theory. And that was something I kept in mind quite often, especially because they were young boys, and I thought that was part of their game that they needed to develop. We needed to create leaders and that sense of ownership on the pitch. So I've thought about that quite a lot, and that's maybe something I've talked about in the article I wrote in the Psychologist as well. And I really learned a little bit more when I was writing that article about what I've learned as a coach and what I've applied. And then the other things are just kind of the things I learned from like child and family. So thinking about what's happening at home for these people, thinking about the ABC model, the iceberg model, all those sort of things, thinking a bit more deeply about the players, and they are people, and they were a good bunch of lads to work with. They were lovely lads, academy boys, all wanted to do really well. So it was quite a good bunch to apply those psychological principles on, really. Yeah, you get to know the boys deeper, and then I think just being myself was really helpful as well. I'm quite an extrovert. I quite like people. I'm curious about people anyway. So I didn't have to really change my personality much at all. It was just more about being yourself and not trying to be like a stereotypical football coach, really, where you're shouting and telling boys off. That's not my style. And as soon as I appreciated that, I think I started to enjoy it more as well, and the boys responded better as well. And yeah, we've had some success. We've had a couple of league titles, and it was a good 5 years. Yeah.
Amazing, and I bet they'll really miss you, and you'll obviously miss aspects of that. You might not miss the drafty, drafty Welsh weather. I'm now a football mum. I have a whole coat that I've bought. I've got a whole outfit. Yeah, if it's raining or windy, it's not always the most pleasant place to be, is it? Um, and as we're talking, like, I'm really thinking about your experience of also, being male and psychology, and even picking up that psychology book and, asking your mates to quiz you on kind of brain parts. Like, that can't have been that easy, even being different. I'm guessing most of your friends probably weren't picking up psychology books, but maybe they were. Maybe this is like, the friendship group that you had. But raising your head up and being like, actually, I'm going to pursue psychology. I want to ultimately be a qualified psychologist one day, and I'm male. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting concept because I think when I was growing up, especially in comprehensive school, and even when I went to A levels, I didn't see it as like a female-dominated profession. And to be honest, I don't think my friends do either. So the friends who haven't really worked in psychology, they probably would have given me a bit of stick for working with like a female, but I don't think they know. So hopefully they don't see this part of the podcast. But it's not something I thought of either. I think maybe that's because if you think of some of the famous psychologists, they tend to be men. I think some of the more prominent ones at the moment, it tends to be more men. And it was only until I remember quite vividly, I walked into Manchester University Open Day, and there must have been like 80% girls there. And my dad turned to me, I can see why you want to do psychology now. And I think I didn't know about this. This is kind of the first time I realized it was female dominated. And then I've gone into the undergraduate, and you see it's like 75%, 80% women on the course, and it's the same now when you go into clinical. For me, I've kind of enjoyed that. I think growing up, I got two brothers. All my cousins are boys. All my mates were boys. Really, I was very much a football, rugby kind of guy who would spend all his time with boys. At one point, you could say, would it be difficult working with women? But it hasn't been at all. I've really enjoyed it, and I think it's quite enjoyable being sometimes the only man or one of the few men on the team, because you do bring something new. You do have different insights and different perspectives on things, and you do feel quite valued. Yeah, so I've kind of enjoyed it. It does. I think it is a little bit harder for some men in psychology. I think it's certainly hard to, like we were talking about before, show your vulnerability and open up and be really reflective. I feel like maybe men start a few years behind. It takes a little bit longer to catch up. I feel like women got maybe more of a running start at that. But as soon as you're able to develop those skills and learn them, it does become easier. But I think it's something I thought about a lot. And is it a positive or negative? And I remember when I first started off, my supervisor said you're going to have to work a little bit harder in clinical psychology because you're a man. I took it with a pinch of salt. I thought it's not going to be like that. It's going to be fine. All the talk around equality and diversity, and people will acknowledge that. And he was probably right when I look back. Yeah, so it's full of challenges, but it's full of opportunities as well. I think being one of the few men in the course, it does allow you to do maybe things that other people don't.
Yeah, and that question had kind of the conversation had come up because like I said, as soon as I got your submissions for the ethnography chapter, like, I just was really taken by the way that you'd submitted them and what you'd written, and even the length of what you'd written on the survey. Like, it was just really impressive. And I kind of said to you, well, how long has it taken you to get to where you are now? And you were like, oh, sort of lost count really, but maybe like about six applications. And like, so you've really kept trying. But is it okay to ask how old you are?
Yeah, I was 31 in January.
Okay. So you're not super much older than most people, but it's how you've kept going, and actually the choices you've made. So you are Welsh, and you've never lived outside of Wales, but actually, you have had reserve place offers for the University of South Wales, but last year that didn't come about, and you were like, actually, I've got this place offer at this uni, and I'm going for it. I'm taking control, and I'm leaving the country that's raised me. That's not an easy decision to make, but I'm really pleased that it's working out for you. But really, in psychology, because of the small nature, I think it's of assistant jobs as well, and certainly doctoral places, people will often will uproot their entire life. I only moved from the kind of Milton Keynes area to Coventry, but I still did it. Still got all of my belongings, moved, and it's not a small thing to do, is it? But it's that passion that drives you.
Yeah, I was always taken aback when I heard people move from like London and parts of England to work in Newport for an assistant role. So people move for assistant roles, which is it's not something I probably would have done, to be honest. There's plenty of opportunities in South Wales. I did work in Powys for a bit, which was like an hour there, hour back commute, and that was quite tough, especially when the fuel prices were as high as they were. I think it was 2022, 21, when it was like £2 a litre for diesel. But yeah, people do it, and it is so competitive, and I think that's why people do it. It's that uber competitiveness, but it's also for a lot of people, I feel clinical psychology is the only route that's feasible for them due to the funding, due to the cost. So I think that's why there's that bottleneck you see, and unfortunately, lots of graduates in psychology, they don't use that degree directly. They go off and do other things because they see clinical psychology is not a feasible option for them. You do need a little bit of luck. You do need a little bit of good timing. I was lucky in a way that I got my first assistant role sort of 9 months after my master's. I don't know how long I would have stuck at doing it because I didn't realize how much I enjoyed until I did it. So that, I was lucky I got a foot in the door fairly early on in my career, and then that you're in roles you enjoy. So that always helps. But yeah, certainly this year, when I was on the reserve list for Cardiff this year, I didn't get an interview again, and that's kind of the second time I haven't got an interview after having an interview. And I found the Southampton interview really tough. I didn't think I did as well as maybe the Cardiff courses, but I must have done something right. But I remember speaking to my supervisor saying, I'm kind of done with this now. I can't, because I'm 31, I'm still an assistant. People around me are getting on, but I'm not getting on. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I can't do much more. I've got publications, I've all these different roles. I've worked in research. I've worked across the lifespan. I can't do anymore. And I was kind of done with it, to be honest. And I was starting to think of other things to do, maybe going back and studying medicine or going and working in a completely different field where I can earn more money quickly. But thankfully, last ditch attempt, I got on, and yeah, I haven't looked back really. I was just pleased I got on because it is. I think this is the field that I'm suited to the best, and this is where I feel most comfortable, and it suits my skills, and it's probably the area I can go the furthest in. So, but for lots of people, they don't get the rub of the green, they don't get the luck, or they haven't got the ability to move away. For whatever reason, whether it's financial or personal reasons, they can't move from Wales to London or to Liverpool or Glasgow or wherever because they've got other things going on.
Absolutely. And I think before we started recording, you'd said actually it's actually really hard to kind of go into an interview where you've never met them before, you don't know anything about them, and to then be really vulnerable, from a standing start. And I guess this is what we ask our clients to do as well, isn't it? But you kind of said that actually it feels trickier because that's not necessarily something that you do regularly. It takes you time to build those relationships. So that's maybe an additional barrier to getting you in the profession.
Yeah, and I think during my Southampton interview, for example, I'm sat there and there's 3 or 4 women looking back at me, and I'm thinking, I've been told time and time again, I need to show vulnerability and I need to do this and I need to do that. But it's almost like it's ingrained in you not to do that, and your gut feeling is saying, don't show your vulnerability here, don't show your weakness here. And sometimes, you just can't do it, even though you feel like that's the thing to do, which is I feel that's quite unnatural, and that's not me then being authentic. It's almost like I gotta say something. I gotta show a weakness here, a vulnerability, because that's what they like. So it's kind of the whole interview mentality then, I suppose, where you're doing things, you want to be yourself, but also you've got to sort of play the game a little bit. And I didn't like that part of the interview, I suppose, where you got to do things that doesn't feel natural to you. I think when you're in a stressful environment and you get one shot at this, otherwise you've got to do the whole stressful, rigorous decline application again and wait another year and you're still in an assistant role, that pressure does get to you and you do go back to what you know and what you feel safe doing. And that is, what men do best is just saying everything's fine and getting on with things and saying, yeah, it's great. And I definitely did that in the Southampton interview. Maybe towards the end, I was able to express that. But even in the feedback, it was like, yeah, shows a bit more vulnerability. But for men, that's really hard. We're conditioned for the last 30 years not to do that, really. So,
Yeah, and it's whether we can, I guess, as supervisors, either male or female supervisors, it's whether we can, I guess, really recognize that and really try to use supervision as a space not just for client protection and kind of case management, but to think about vulnerability and trying to weave in that and reflect. Is that something that's been done with you in supervision? Do you think that's something that would be beneficial to do more of? Can you do it now as a trainee, for example?
I feel like, yeah, when you get on the course, you do feel a little bit more confident, a little bit more relaxed. As an assistant, you're still in that kind of rat race a little bit. You're trying to get on, and you're trying to get to the next checkpoint. You're trying to do the best you can. I think it probably takes more than just supervision once a week with a clinical psychologist who you're working with. I think to break down those barriers and change how men think, it's going to take more than that. So I think it's more about changing, more about taking into consideration how men work in psychology and adhering to those needs rather than trying to change the men. Because I feel like the system at the moment does suit women more because of that emphasis on reflection and showing vulnerability, whereas it's really hard for men to do that. I think thinking about it is not the problem. We're able to reflect and think about it, but it's just verbalizing it and putting that out to, especially around women, and women you don't know. But yeah, when you get comfortable in supervision, I feel like that's been the case. But at the same time, I think it's easier to reflect and share your vulnerabilities with someone you can relate to. But that's difficult as a man in psychology because very few people like us in the profession. So yes, it's a difficult balancing act to have, and it's something that I think should be taken into consideration more. It is difficult, and we're talking about equality and diversity and inclusion and trying to make things as accessible for everybody. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't feel like men are brought into that conversation as much as maybe they could be. And I think it's a bit of a paradox with society and clinical psychology, really. It's the other way, I feel.
Yeah, and it's definitely, I hear you. Like, it's really hard when you are striving in a career to be vulnerable enough that that's seen as good. That's
Yeah.
very good. And not so vulnerable that you're unhinged and need a safeguarding referral put in and you don't then get a reference. Like, it's it's striking that magic balance. And yeah, it's like it's that power dynamic, isn't it? That actually, especially as an assistant, that you don't always have. And I think my experiences of then moving on to training, and I had 6 different supervisors during my time, and very quickly having to forge working relationships with those, some more successfully than others, and still having that power held over you. You haven't been there yet because you're yet to start your first placement, but there will be likely a mid-placement review, and during that mid-placement review, a question will be asked: is there any chance that Jack could fail this placement? I can tell you that, when you're waiting for that answer, you're like, oh my God. And once you hear, hopefully, no, you're like, oh. And then you really can be thinking about how to, meet your goals and finish this placement on a high. But you are constantly assessed for those 3 years.
Yeah, it's not something I've thought about too much in fairness. Um, but I think given that, like you said, it's been a long time getting on the course, and that comes with lots of different assistant psychology roles. That's certainly going to help me on the course. I think I'm kind of used to changing and working in different teams quite frequently. There's very yeah. I've worked in all the big settings really. I've worked in older adult, child and family. I did a secondment in adult psychology, so I've kind of got lots of skills that I can always lean back on. But being assessed is something new again. Having that having that conversation is going to be difficult. Yes, I haven't thought about it, so it's going to be interesting, and how I deal with maybe criticism and rooms for improvement. I think will be, yeah, something I'll have to get used to. Not many. I think with assistant psychologists roles, they're often very positive. They want to build you up and make you feel more confident. So, yeah, I haven't thought about that, to be honest, Marianne. So I'll have a
Yeah, well, food for thought, but do allow yourself to grow into these new roles. I think we can often put ourselves a lot of pressure on ourselves to go into a placement feeling like we are the expert at that already, or that we should be better, you know. And I think almost one of the most powerful placement experiences I had was intellectual disabilities, because I had never worked in that setting. And so I actually went in feeling like a bit of a fraud, actually. How am I going to go and deliver anything of substance when I've got to start from zero, really? But when I allowed myself to do that, and I was honest on day one with my supervisor, I've never done this before. I don't really, I don't really know what I'm doing, and maybe I haven't even ever really applied for roles, even as assistants with people with intellectual disabilities, because A, I didn't think I'd get them, and B, it wasn't really one of my passions, you know? So now I'm delivering a service to people and to their families. And my supervisor was so kind and so sweet and just allowed me to grow. And actually, when my placement was finished, they were like, "We would love to have you back as qualified." And they were trying to put a job together so that it would be ready, so that it would have gone through the funding by the time I finished training. And unfortunately, it just wasn't ready. It wasn't ready for like another sort of 6 months after I qualified. So I already had a job, but they still contacted me and said, "It's ready. It's going out to advert. Will you apply?" And I was like, "I'm really sorry. Like, I don't feel like I can now." But that is, if we allow ourselves to grow and we are maybe open about what we don't yet know, we can grow beyond where we would have imagined we might be able to be. That's, I guess, the value in allowing yourself to be curious and allowing yourself to grow, and maybe being a little bit open.
Yeah, I think that's the subtle difference, isn't it, between placements and assistant psychologist roles. You in a strange way, you haven't put your name in a hat to go into that job like you would do with an assistant. You haven't applied for it, said why you're going to be great at it, and then go out do it. Whereas with the placements, you put into it. You've applied for clinical psychology, so you've been honest about that. But then when you place in that placement, then maybe you don't feel confident, or maybe don't think you're going to enjoy. But that's not you being disingenuous or anything like that. It's kind of, well, this is how I feel. But I think, like you said, it is important to go in with an open mind. Because I've certainly been in that position where maybe some of the roles I thought I was going to enjoy, maybe I didn't enjoy as much as I thought, and vice versa. And yeah, I think when I've worked in intellectual disabilities, I had a similar feeling. How am I going to work with this clientele? I haven't got loads of experience. Everyone seems to really know what they're doing. But then when you keep that open mind and you learn and pick up skills, I think I probably learned so much more in those roles than maybe in my other roles, because I was soaking everything up and trying to learn as much as I can just so I could do the job, really. And yeah, and it wasn't as scary, and it wasn't as different as I thought it was going to be, really. And you're still able to bring all those skills and experience you've got from other roles into that role that's maybe seems so different to what you've done before as well.
Absolutely. We've got those core skills and our own personhood that we bring with us. And, I think even every supervision session you've ever had and every supervisor you ever had, they're kind of in the room with you as well. So it's not that you're starting completely from zero. You've still got your soft skills. You've still got ways of being. And obviously, even people with intellectual disabilities, you're often working with their families. They're often not intellectually disabled themselves. And so there's lots of transferable skills. But yeah, you've reminded me, actually, in my first placement, I found it really challenging to not have been chosen.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the other side of the coin, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, you haven't been chosen. Yeah.
And knowing that I'm filling the shoes of someone that's just left, and I'm filling the shoes of a first year who has done 2 placements already, and I'm coming in as a first year first placement. I found it really hard. I don't know if it's my ego, I'm not sure, but I found it really hard because obviously in assistant roles you are chosen because probably there's been 150 people apply and you're the cream of the crop. It almost maybe develops this slightly narcissistic, I've been chosen so I can go in there and I can feel a bit more confident and self-assured. I wasn't chosen. Not by this woman anyway. Some of the people that interviewed me, they chose me. I haven't been chosen. I could have been anyone. Maybe they'd have preferred someone else. And then you find yourself sitting there and you think, oh yeah, that person from my cohort, they would probably have fitted in better here than me. And it's a lot of noise. But we can notice those thoughts. We can notice them and not hopefully be derailed by them.
Yeah. I sent an email so we had our placements this week, and I sent an email to my new supervisor, and it was almost like part of me was thinking, when I send this email, I want to come across as quite competent, and I'm going to be okay. I can do this job. Don't worry, I'm not completely useless. And I think I mentioned I've worked in this service before, and I probably said that just so she doesn't think, oh, I've got this person who doesn't know anything. At least I'm going in with a little bit of a knowledge, and I'm going to be able to do the job somewhat. So kind of don't worry, sort of thing. But it was an unusual situation to be in, and I suppose your ego does come into it a little bit because you want to be okay doing the job, really, and you want to be valued and not made to feel like you shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I had a slightly cringy moment then, just thinking back. So I'd been given a time and a date and a location to go and meet my first ever supervisor, but maybe I worried that I wasn't going to be held in mind, or that I needed something like extra. So I did actually make contact with. I think I emailed my supervisor or called them and left a message or something like that. And they were like, yeah, did you not get the message about the time and the day? And I was like, yes, but like, okay,
Yeah.
I'll see you then. Because ordinarily plans aren't made for us, are they? We make our own plans, or the person has made them directly with us or sent it to us, and it's come kind of vicariously round the houses. And I just needed to be seen a bit more, but thankfully she didn't hold that against me.
Yeah, it's unusual really to start a place when you haven't met the person before. So obviously with the assistant roles, you would have met them in an interview or had a chat beforehand. Can we sort the DBS check out? Where do I get my laptop from? I don't think we're going to do that for this. You're just going to turn up on the day, and you probably turn up. Nobody knows who you are. You've got an awkward conversation with the receptionist. Hi, I'm Jack. I'm here for my first day. Jack, who are you here to see? And you're like thinking of the name as, I think it's Ali. I think that's her name. It's always uncomfortable the first day, but that's something I've got used to anyway. I think you just got to go in knowing it's probably not going to go smoothly. It's going to be a bit chaotic on the first day. Hopefully I'm wrong, but probably right.
You never know, So I've joined some services that are like that. I've joined others that you turn up and on day one there's 12 folders on your desk and you're like, oh, okay, they did know I was coming. Now I've got to get up to speed. So yeah, it's all placements are so different, but just go with it and be curious, be reflective if you can, and just allow yourself to grow, to learn, to develop, and know that all of those great skills that you spoke about, even stuff that you've done with the coaching for your academy, all of that is with you. All the boys you've worked with, they want you to do really, really well, as does everyone else who knows you. And we're all rooting for you as well, Jack. So I hope placement 1 and beyond goes so well for you. Thank you so much for joining us, Jack.
Thanks very much.
Thank you again to my guest today, Jack. The kindest thing you can do is to go wild in the comments with support, with encouragement, with how this resonated for you. And I know that Jack will be really pleased to see those comments as well. You can do that on YouTube. You can do that on Spotify. Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you found it helpful, I would love it if you consider following or subscribing to the show wherever you watch or listen. It's the kindest thing you can do for any creator that you rate. If it's your time and you're ready for the next step in this wild old ride of psychology, do consider coming along to the Aspiring Psychologist membership. You can join from £30 a month with no minimum term, and it's never the right or wrong stage of your career to join. It's never too early. It's never too late. Thank you again. The next episode of the podcast will be available from 10 a.m. on Saturdays on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from 6 a.m. on Monday. Thank you so much for being part of my world. Take care of yourself and I'll see you very soon. Bye.